Well, thank you for attending this year's annual general meeting. Again, we're holding it online and we will do our best to get it to run on time so that everyone can get off and enjoy their evenings. So this meeting has a dual function. The first function is a formal function to get the governance ready for the next year IPEM, and that we properly appoint our auditors and trustees in accordance with the rules and regulations. But also there is an opportunity to ask questions and engage, and part of the reason we're doing this as an open meeting this year is to pick up some feedback we've had from the volunteers forum that we've run several times this year, to make it easier for feedback to happen and people to contribute. So we'll see how that works, and any feedback you have on that will be helpful. We're also going to be making some important appointments today. So we'll have the opportunity to elect board of trustees, but also this is quite a significant AGM, in hopefully we are going to elect IPEM's first ever female president, so or president-elect I should say at this stage. So this is actually an overdue and somewhat important meeting, so that's wonderful. The other thing to recognise is, of course, is obviously we've just finished a period of national mourning. However, we will make an acknowledgement to the King and Queen about that in the minutes to make sure that it's properly recorded at the appropriate junction. And also, we ought to, I think, say some farewells, one of which has been Catherine Surtees at the National Office, who has worked very hard over the past 11 years to keep us on track financially and also in terms of operations as well, and has got us all through COVID and led us through website upgrades and various things. So we say a fond farewell to Catherine and a big welcome to our new head of operations and finance, Claire Sharp. So welcome there. And finally, before we formally start, you should all have received the papers. We will assume that these have been read, so we won't go through them in great detail when making the votes, but you should have done them. Right, so we'll now make a formal start. So we're going to make everything, try to run to time as much as possible. So we have received apologies for absence, and these will be noted in the minutes. So we'll do that. You should all have received the minutes of the 27th annual meeting, which was held last year, again online. You should all have read them. So if anyone wants to highlight any inaccuracies, please do so now using the electronic raise hand function. Okay, have we got any there?
I can't see any, Rob.
No, great, thank you, Phil. Okay, and we've got no inaccuracies recorded, so could we please now propose the motion to accept the minutes of the 27th IPEM annual January meeting? James is going to launch a poll. We'll hold it open for 30 seconds, during which time you will have chance to vote. James, could you launch the poll, please?
You can say that's carried, Rob.
Okay, thank you very much. And I've realised I've been very remiss and haven't introduced anyone. Should we do that a bit later or before the next item?
We could do that now.
Okay, sorry, that was my mistake. Okay, so we'll just introduce the board. I think it's really important to introduce the key members of the National Office and the Board of Trustees. So what's the easiest way to do this, Phil?
just call out, I think, as you see their names appear on your list, Rob, if you've got the list, if you can pull the list up.
Okay, I haven't got a very easy list, unfortunately. So I've got Phil. Let's Phil introduce.
Okay. Hi, I'm Phil Morgan. I'm the Chief Executive of IPEM. Many of you, I think, will know me by now.
Okay, brilliant. I've got Valerie.
Valerie Jolliffe, Independent Trustee and Honorary Secretary.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I've got Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire Sharp, Head of Operations and Finance. I'm sharing a speaker with Phil, so we'll ask picture of Phil instead.
Thank you. Eva.
Yeah, I'm Eva McLean and I'm the EDI and Member Network Manager.
Then I've got Andrew.
Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Riley. I'm the outgoing Director of IPEM Science, Technology, Engineering, Research and Innovation Council, STERIC.
Great, thank you, Andrew. John.
Hi, I'm John Turner. I'm not a member, I'm an independent trustee, and for my sins, I'm the Honorary Treasurer.
National Office. Or not. Okay, Claire.
Hello, I'm Claire Hardiman and I am a member trustee.
Brilliant, thank you. Jemima.
Hello, I'm Jemima Eve and I'm IPEM's Head of Workforce Intelligence and Training.
Okay, I've got Richard.
Hi there, I'm Richard Stubbs. I'm the current Director of the Professional Standards Council for IPEM.
Brilliant, and I've got Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Metcalf. I'm a member trustee and current chair of the Journals Working Group.
Right, brilliant. Is Justin here?
Yeah, I'm Justin Richards. I'm an independent trustee. I've been with IPEM for about 5 years now.
Okay, if there's any of the existing trustees that I've missed because I'm doing this from memory, please raise your hands now. Okay, brilliant. I can't see anyone. Excellent, thank you. Oh, sorry, Jason, did I not do you? Oh, I did do you. Great. Excellent, thank you. Did I do you, Jason?
No idea. I'm Jason Wild. I'm an independent trustee. If that's once or twice, I don't think it matters.
Right, okay, brilliant. Thank you all. Right, we'll move on to the agenda again, the next item. So we've done the minutes. Apologies for that. Okay, were there any other matters arising from the minutes that we're not otherwise covered on the agenda? If you could raise your electronic hands. No. Brilliant, thank you. So the first one is the resolution of to reappoint the appointment of the auditors. This is BHP, who are our new auditors who audited this year, who were reappointed due to some concerns with the previous auditors and are generally considered to have done a pretty good job. So the plan is to reappoint BHP as the Chartered Accountants as auditors to the Institute of Physics and Engineering in Medicine group of companies in accordance with section 487, section 2, I think, of the Companies Act for the year ending December 2022. So the proposal is to reappoint the auditors as the Chartered Accountants as IPEM auditors. This is BHP. If you would like to say again. Seconded by Valerie. Yeah, marvelous. And the votes are 4 against and abstaining. So if James, you could launch the poll, which will be open for 30 seconds. Everyone could vote. Thank you.
That's carried, Rob, with 274 votes, including the proxy votes for, 3 votes against from the proxy votes and 3 abstentions, sorry.
Brilliant. So that resolution is carried.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Okay, the fifth item on the agenda is the approval of the Board of Trustees 2022-23. You have the biographies and details of every member in your papers, so I'm not going to go through them by name. But the vote to be taken is to approve the Board of Trustees for 2022-2023. The seconder is Valerie. Great, thank you. And the votes are for, against, or abstain. James, could you open the poll, please, for 30 seconds? Thank you.
Sorry, Rob, could I just ask, should trustees themselves be voting on this?
That's a good question.
As far as I'm aware, there's no reason why not, if you're a voting member of the Institute, which are associates, full members and fellows.
Thank you.
And Rob, that's 274 in favour, 1 against and 3 abstentions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So that resolution is passed. Thank you. Right. So the next item on the agenda is the annual report and accounts for 2021. I'm going to present those. The report is published, so all the details in here. So I'm going to speak to this, if that's okay, and give you a verbal summary. But all the detailed numbers are in the annual general report, which is available online and you should also receive the copy electronically. Okay, so I think if we look back over the year, it's been a particularly interesting year for IPEM because obviously we've been coming out of the pandemic as well as trying to press forward. Perhaps the most recent event, and now is the time to acknowledge it, I think, in the minutes, is that obviously Queen Elizabeth II passed away a few weeks ago. So now we're out of the mourning. We're not going to hold a minute's silence, but what we are going to do is ask that we acknowledge her service, both to the country and to the profession. And also we'd like to pass on our condolences to King Charles III and the royal family. Okay. So in many ways, this year has looked like the previous year, which has meant we've been working online, but not solely online. We have started now having meetings and committees face to face and on Teams. So we're currently working in what is a hybrid mode. Governance terms, we remained on course. So the 4 board meetings of the Board of Trustees were held in the usual way, and some committees actually have had greater support in participation as the result of the online working, which has been good. There's been much deliberation, which started under my predecessor, Stephen O'Connor. A new strategy was launched in July 2021, and IPEM 2025 basically states our route to growth in membership, training and events, and essentially the sustainability of the organisation and its expansion. It includes within that membership as well, and a journals working group has been formed specifically to address the fact that much of IPEM's income, in fact the majority, comes through journals publishing, and this has been highlighted as a risk by trustees, and part of that strategy is to diversify income streams for the organisation. So we've enjoyed another record year, however, in journal income, which is actually a nice problem to have. An IPEM translation, the first fully open access journal, has also enjoyed its first year in publication. The other thing which I think should be apparent to all members is that a lot of staff time has been diverted, and I do think we ought to acknowledge formally the contribution to the staff, particularly at the National Office, towards the end of the project for their hard work and dedication on that. I know there were late nights and things in getting the system working. This is the new website, and the work really came to a head about Christmas, and the new site went live early this year. This is the first phase in this work. So there are aspects of it. This is the front end that has been done. So whilst it's nice and shiny, there are other bits of it that aren't quite working as we want. And there is a piece of work that's starting now to look at replacing the systems behind it that run it, so that we get a really slick system. In terms of professional development, then I can report that 76 technologists enrolled on IPEM's training scheme, which is an increase from 51 the year before and much needed in the workforce. By the end of 2021, 62 people had enrolled on the Part 2 training scheme, and that supports registration as a clinical scientist through routing. The MRSE, that's the MR Safety Expert Certificate of Competence, has been launched and is running, and I think the second one is about to run now. The IPEM CPD audit was completed, and reassuringly, the pass rate was significantly higher than in 2020, presumably because things were being easier for people to do CPD. So it increased from 69% in 2020 to 97% in 2021. Similarly, the Register of Clinical Technologists audit was also completed, and the pass rate for that was similar at 94%. So that's very reassuring. 14 events were held online, and overall were attended by more than 1,300 people. The official annual MPEC meeting was held online in September with 200 participants, and also an online trainee induction day was held in January. We're continuing to grow as an organisation. So, excuse me, our membership grew by 819 in the year to reach 5,183 on the 31st of December. 12 more members achieved registration in 2021, 6 of whom as chartered scientists or engineers. There were 2,468 names on the Register of Clinical Technologists by the end of the year, and Scope magazine won a highly commended award at the national awards. So congratulations to the team and everyone involved in the work on Scope. We've, as you know, one of the big aims of IPEM is to increase diversity and inclusion in the profession, and we've been continuing our work in support of the Royal Academy of Engineering and Science Council's EDI progression framework, and commenced working on the new edition of the framework to benchmark performance. So these have now been carried forward into an EDI action plan in 2022-2023, which is reported to trustees regularly. And I think those of you who've been to the National Office recently, now it's open, will have seen some significant changes there. So there are all gender toilets, for example, and other changes as well, which I think are all positive. So we have continued on that theme to monitor the gender split of our committee members. We're continuing to participate in the Science Council EDI steering group. Online discussion forums are continuing for members with protected characteristics to enable networking and support. We've supported the Professional Associations Research Network EDI Committee and engaged in sharing best practice, attended the Athena Forum, held training sessions, and in fact there's one for trustees in a couple of weeks' time, signed the Engineering UK Code, and which aims at making engineering more exclusive and change, I think that should say inclusive, changed outreach practices accordingly, and started cooperating with other organisations such as Into Science to develop inclusion in STEM and attract people into STEM who are underrepresented. And similarly, perhaps quite significantly, the Clinical Imaging Board have of the RCR, so that's the Royal College of Radiologists, Society and College of Radiographers, and IPEM have just published public education posters for X-ray procedures by making them more inclusive. So one of the other themes we've got running at the moment is around leadership, and that's professional leadership we're talking about here. So 31 bespoke workforce reports have been supplied to members. We've responded to 15 consultations. We've published advice guidance notes, topical reports, ebooks as well. Innovation grants, 3 of those have been awarded along with a PhD bursary. And IPEM has started to publish and contribute to news stories and comment on news stories. So a new radiotherapy module to the ionizing radiation medical exposures regulations was launched. Diagnostic imaging network implementation guide was developed with IPEM, and again the SCOR and the Royal College of Radiologists. President's Gold Medals have been awarded for exceptional service in the pandemic. We've called in a letter to the Chancellor for investment in R&D. Molecular radiotherapy services, as we know, are a problem, and there's a postcode lottery, and that's been highlighted by IPEM, and also the workforces and the issues and effects that they have on cancer services has been noted. And perhaps also very significantly, but by no means last, is the campaign making the case for statutory registration for clinical technologists. And finally, he says, we've ended the year coming out of the COVID pandemic, hopefully, and something near to a new normality returning. However, staff have continued to work to maintain a COVID-safe workplace. And looking ahead, building on 2021 and 2022, the plan is, as you'll see from the strategy, more professional leadership, particularly on the future operating environment for members through the science leadership strategy, which Catriona will be talking about later. We're going to continue to push for growth by improving our income streams and making sure that IPEM has a sustainable long-term future to support the profession and enable the work of the profession to continue, and better customer experience. So with the improvements on the website, as I've said, we're working on the next steps of a customer relationships management system and a new finance system, which should deliver hopefully the sort of online, I think the word is experience that people expect. So hopefully that will be coming soon. Thank you all very much for listening to that. We do have time for a couple of questions, if anyone has any. I can't see any electronic hands. Nope. Okay, thank you all very much indeed. So the next item on the agenda is the 2021 annual report or financial report presented by our Honorary Treasurer, Mr. John Turner. John, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Rob. I'll start off by James, if you could put the first slide on, please. Thank you. A lot of what Rob said sort of manifested itself in the figures for 2021. We had another outstanding performance for our scientific journals. We thought 2020 was exceptional and a record-breaking 920,000. For 2021, we exceeded that at 952. Our membership is sort of stable, and that's reflected in the subscription income. And the big thing, of course, as Rob alluded to, is that yes, life started, some of it went back to normal, but a large part of 2021, I mean, it certainly started off with everything closed again for the first few months. So, not a lot happened physically, and that had an enormous impact in terms of our travel and meeting costs. We didn't hire rooms to hold meetings. We didn't have budgets for people to travel to them. Most of the events, the scientific program was held online, well, not exclusively, but virtually all. And then another thing that manifested itself during the course of the year is that, we had a few people who left, and we had a little bit of difficulty in recruiting their replacement. So all in all, our income was up 9%, and our expenses were down 24% versus budget. And so we actually ended up with a surplus rather than what we had planned. James, if you move on to the next slide. It was all very, very good, but it wasn't quite what we'd planned. We hadn't expected quite such a good result for publications. We had planned for a return to more or less normal life. We had planned to recruit, to replace, and also to expand the workforce, which has sort of took longer than expected. And we'd actually anticipated to finish the year with a deficit of 221. So all in all, it was, this good news and bad news. The good news is that financially this was a tremendous result. The bad news is that we weren't able to do quite all the things we wanted to do during the course of the year. Another Chris Whitty moment. Next slide, please. Thank you. And that's sort of summarized here in this little picture. The green bars are what we had planned to do. The blue bars is what actually happened, and the yellow bars is the comparative for the previous year, 2020. So, when I say that not much has changed, you just look at the surplus on the right-hand side. The 2021 and the 2020 bars are more or less in the same place. I'll move on to the next slide, please. There are sort of other things which aren't necessarily, which I'm talking about separately because they're things that we don't necessarily control. We did receive a fairly large chunk of money from the government for the Learning for Health program, and not all of which was spent. But because that's actually given to us for a specific purpose, it is treated as restricted funds, which means we can't spend it on anything else. There's not something that's entirely within our control. And then, of course, the investment portfolio actually had another barnstorming year with a return of near on 15%. I mean, the bad news is, of course, as those of you who read the papers and look at these things will be aware that things have come back somewhat this year, and that part of that 15% that we gained last year has been given back. But still, overall, over the life of the investment since we started making it in 2016, we have achieved, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that we keep to do that, well in excess of the target RPI plus 3%. The next slide is for people who are sort of concerned about the level of robustness. So I'm talking here about our, the cumulative amount. If you add up all the surpluses we made over all the years, we have at 4.3 million. And of that, 300,000 is this quote restricted unquote, which is people money that people have given to us for a specific purpose, which we can't really treat as our own. And of that, of the 4 million left, we fund the fixed assets of the company, which is principally it's Fairmount House, but it's also all the fixtures and equipment, etc., etc. So that's not treated as a liquid asset. And then we've set aside, and this has been set aside for a while, a 1.7 million. This is it sort of to help us manage the transition to the future. And I'll come back to that in the next slide. So what we call free reserves, which is the sort of the amount we've got to be comfortable with to keep us going through thick and thin, is actually at the end of 2021 at a higher level than the target that we set some years ago. And that is one of the reasons we are actually quite comfortable if in in 1 year, not on a sustainable basis, but if in a given year we have a small deficit, it's manageable with the financial reserves that the organisation has. So should we move on to the next slide, please? And this is, I think, is one of my favourite illustrations of where our income comes from, and this illustrates the point that Rob was making earlier on, that the enormous level proportion of income that comes from journals. It's well over 50%, and everything else makes up less than 50%. And whilst, as Rob says, this is a nice problem to have, it is not necessarily sustainable in the long term, particularly with the transition to open access publishing. And this is something that was the driving force behind the board setting up a committee to look after publications under the chairmanship of Ben. And if we, one of the consequences of COVID has been that our, because our publication income has continued to be good and grown, and everything, other things such as our conference income and scientific meeting income, et cetera, has been curtailed. It has taken an even larger proportion of the total than before, which is not really in the direction of travel that we want to be in. But hopefully, as we move forward into through the rest of 2022 and into 2023, things will get a little go back on track in terms of diversifying the source of income. So next slide, please. That's really just the narrative of what I was saying a minute ago. So next slide, please. So what's 2022 looking like? Yes, we have started to go back to much more normal levels of activity and spending. We have a full complement of staff, and we've got two major projects which we've started, the first one of which is the new customer relationship management system, which has been approved, but the work hasn't really started in earnest, and the new accounting system, which is still under discussion. So the upshot for the year is we'll probably end up with a small deficit, but much smaller than that than we had budgeted. And that, I think, is really where we are at the moment. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Do I have any quick questions for John? Thank you, John, for that.
Thank you.
Hugh, I've got Hugh. Hello, Hugh. I shall try and.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, John, and hello. John, it strikes me you'll be a really hard act to follow, and I think from memory, I think I'm right in saying that the term of the treasurer has actually been reduced. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm just wondering what the succession planning is for your role. I don't know how long you've got still in post.
As things currently stand, in fact, my term as treasurer is 5 years, and I have another 2 to go. This is well, 1 because you've just elected me on the board for another year, and then the year after, well, I guess it's up to the membership to decide. But normally speaking, to follow that, I'll be stepping down 2 years from now. And I think that gives us time to find a suitable successor in the intervening period. Thank you, Hugh, for the compliment.
Thank you, John, for the answer. Anyone else got any questions? If not, it looks like there are none. I shall. Oh, hang on, Steve.
I was part of the review about the PCC, the Professional Conduct Committee, and things like that. I think part of it was to do with how much that was costing. Have you any thoughts on that? and where the review has gone to?
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question. Phil, you?
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks for the question, Steve. We've got a trustees meeting coming up mid next month, at which we're making a recommendation for changes to the disciplinary process, which, if the trustees choose to accept them, should reduce the cost of running the process, which currently is quite onerous and quite expensive for IPEM to operate. But that's not, it's not about whether the system is cheap to run. It's about whether the system is effective, just, and delivers what our stakeholders expect in terms of our code of conduct and our disciplinary procedures. So thanks for your contribution to the review. We've done a lot of work around that as well, in terms of looking at what other organisations do in similar circumstances and what our stakeholders are expecting, and hopefully we've got a good recommendation to put forward. And there will, after that, I think, be a process of consultation around any changes that the trustees recommend.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So our next item on the agenda is the Science, Technology, Engineering and Innovation Council report, which Andrew Riley is going to talk to, if that's okay.
Thank you, Rob, and hello everyone. It's my pleasure to give this report today, and I'm the outgoing director of STERIC. So I'm going to give an update on what we've managed to do over the last year and what will be coming in the next year. It's worth just thinking about the acronym STERIC for a second, because one of the things we did do this year in an effort to be more inclusive and actually transparently be more inclusive was update the acronym to emphasize technology and engineering alongside science, in case there was any risk that we'd be discouraging input from technologists and engineers, and getting that balance right between all the different parts of our wider community. And the makeup of the council at the moment is 50-50 physics engineering. As we move into this new term, the makeup is roughly the same, and there's a bit more academic input as well going forward too. So hopefully that will have a good positive impact at stimulating activity and engagement as we move forward. If you could go to the next slide, please, James. Thank you. So one of the difficult things over this last year was that all of the meetings but one was held over Teams, and unfortunately that particular meeting, I had COVID, and I think there were travel disruption issues, possibly due to good weather. And as a result, everybody was on Teams anyway, except for one poor person who had to travel all the way there. And I know this is something which is part of the output of the pandemic, but I think we have lost something. It's quite difficult chairing a meeting for 2 years without actually meeting everybody and working in person. But I think looking back, a lot has been achieved, and we have certainly all started making as effective uses as we can of the electronic resources available to us. Now, this last year has been challenging for other reasons too. There have been some difficulties in developing the most effective communication strategy with the SIGs, and also between STERIC and some of the other activities in IPEM. Now, this isn't necessarily a surprise, because it's really only been a few years since the last restructure of the governance arrangements within the organisation, and reflecting it probably takes some time for those to bed in. And if I look back over the last 6 months, we have seen a lot of traction as there's been a changeover in office staff and individuals associated with the different councils and SIGs and groups who have worked very hard to really be the glue in between all the volunteer activity. And just as I'm stepping off the council, it's worth recognising that that has started to make a difference. And it's been very positive when emails have come through highlighting issues have been raised elsewhere, because there was a continuity person in the office who could see different sides of what was happening. And I think that is very positive, and I hope that continues in the future. So the communication challenges really weren't a surprise, because that's what always happens after a restructure, but I think everything is beginning to bed in now, which is really testament to the work that the team is doing. So well done, everybody. Next slide, please. So if I think back over to what we had intended to deliver this year, The new science leadership strategy is being launched later, and Steric put some effort into contributing to that, but really that was led directly by Catriona in the office, so all credit to her. And I know that Anna Barnes was very heavily involved in mentoring that process as well, as it was being refined towards the end. So looking forward to everybody having the chance to see that later. That's a good piece of work, so well done both of you and the wider team on putting that together. Quite a lot has happened with publications in this last year. The new journals group has been mentioned a couple of times, chaired by Ben, and Steric's had a place within that group. And alongside thinking about the way in which IPEM relies on journals for income, a secondary part of the remit of that group, maybe an increasingly important one, has been ensuring that the publications endeavour actually slots in appropriately with what IPEM is trying to achieve. There's no point in having a journal that brings in lots and lots of money if members within the IPEM community aren't actually publishing potentially in that journal, unless that's the intent. So that's been discussed and debated, and some work has been done there too. A separate group looking at the other side of our publications arm, so scientific report series, is also being put together. Now, that's been information for the last few months and is going to come to fruition not long after the AGM here today. And that's being chaired by the editor-in-chief of our scientific report series, who is Mohammed Metwali at the moment. And this is trying to bring back some structure around the strategic planning and review and monitoring of the reports that we used to be very proactive at generating. And I say used to, almost tongue in cheek a little bit, because we still do that. But the traditional IPEM report number X, that's increasingly been replaced now by topical reports. We have codes of practice, we have ebooks, some of which are scientific reports, some of which aren't. So the role of this new group is to try and join that up. And a key element of that is that all publications with an IPEM badge on them, so not so much something in an IPEM journal, but more a journal paper that's labelled IPEM topical report around whatever, or code of practice, or whatever it might be, they'll have an internal review prior to publication. That step was missing for a few years with the migration from the traditional physical reports to the electronic copy. So that's something that's been introduced, not as an additional step, but if it hasn't been included along the way, that will be included towards the end of the process when a new document is published. And something that we've started, and you'll see when I mention Steph in a moment, is trying to link publications with the educational event programme and the conference programme really as an integrated strategy. So whereas these have all separately been operating as activities almost in silos, the idea now is, should a publication be encouraged to be generated by a conference and so on as we progress. Next slide, please. There's been work with the radiotherapy MV code of practice. It's taken longer than we anticipated. The data collection exercise has taken some time, but it's gaining traction now. And the goal is to report that early next year. And hopefully very soon, a plan will be published around how the Interdepartmental Audit Group is being supported as well. A plan has been developed and a lot of work's gone into that. So well done, Sarah Mission Yates and Tony Palmer and Catherine Clark as well, working with Phil to try and pull that together. It wouldn't be appropriate to go into detail on that now because it's through for consideration, but a plan is in place for the first time, which I think is fantastic. Next slide, please. We've got our staff meeting coming up, including the biennial radiotherapy physics meeting. And the goal from that meeting is to bring people together to discuss ideas in a forum that may not be available in the regular one-day meetings. And we're going to encourage right up from that meeting. So if there's a debate, we publish there was a debate, and this is what the conclusion was. And we encourage the best presentations to be written up as papers as well. Next slide, please. The clinical risk management work that was started, IPEM have facilitated 2 courses on that now, one in August, one just about to happen in October. Both were oversubscribed, so that will form the core of a piece of work over this next year, building the community around that. There'll be more detail of that at Steph, and the goal is quite soon to generate an IPEM position statement around what the clinical means in the clinical safety officer role that falls out of the DCB standards. Next slide, please. So in handing over for next year, the membership of STERIC has been refreshed. So Mohammed Al Amri takes over today as the new director, and all the other members of STERIC change as well. But seeing that coming for continuity, we did invite the members starting now to come to the last STERIC meeting to try and make sure there wasn't a jolt in moving to the new group. And some of the activities I've mentioned are going to be continuing, plus a review of the PhD and work bursary when the third bursary is awarded. And really key, trying to make sure we have a sustainable flagship ongoing meeting every year, plus the clinical risk management work. Where does that sit and what is the long-term plan for the IPEM community? So thank you all, and if there's time, happy to take any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Andrew? Take a couple perhaps quickly. I've got Justin.
Can I just ask, what's the thinking behind moving the newly named Medical Physics Engineering Conference from September to late February? I mean, September's usually quite good weather and isn't bad for traveling, whereas late February, early March can sometimes be very challenging.
Right, very simple answer to that. What had happened was, with everybody coming out of the pandemic and trying to organise face-to-face meetings, we discovered an awful lot. There was a glut of meetings at the same time. And after the date had been arranged for this in September, BIR just beat us to the punch, advertising their annual meeting in the same week. So the decision was taken to move it to February. And as we looked in the calendar, we really couldn't find another opportunity. The planning was well underway. We had speakers confirmed. So it wasn't that nothing was happening. It's as simple as that. And I think we'll use it as the opportunity to see what happens. But it wasn't that that's what we wanted to do, but we reckoned that in the balance, that was the best thing to do.
And would there be certainly a thought process to move it back to the September sort of time?
So I think that drops out of the kind of bit on the last slide there. We see what the response is to the meeting this year, and then we react to that. So nothing's off the table, Justin.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've got no other questions. Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you very much for your time as director. Right, okay. So next up is Richard Stubbs, who's going to present the Professional Standards Council report.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Richard Stubbs. A lot of you'll know me through our normal contacts and things, but for those of you that don't, you can see what I look like if you can see the pictures here. But anyway, I'm the current director of the Professional Standards Council, and I'm pleased to be presenting this report to you all this afternoon. So first up, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the role played by the Professional Standards Council, or PSC. Then I'll summarise the key pieces of work completed in the last cycle, and then go on to highlight some of the activity topics currently in progress. So we're on slide 1 now, please, James. So the remit of PSC, as its title suggests, is centred around overseeing and coordinating IPEM's educational, training and professional activities. The council sits under the Board of Trustees, and it's financially connected through the Finance and Business Planning Committee, FB&P. FB&P is what is generally called within circles in IPEM. The PSC manages its activities through its action plan, and it sets up time-bound task and finish groups to assist in fulfilling its role here. There aren't any geographical constraints to PSC's activities across the UK, and PSC will advise IPEM on international issues where it has access to the expertise to do so. Okay, we can go on to slide 2, please. So I've listed the dimensions to PSC scope here, namely education and training, accreditation, CPD, membership and registrations, and standards and workforce. Next slide, please. So in more detail, PSC, with the support of the National Office, provides oversight of these ongoing work streams. So I'll just give you a chance just to look at those. So I'll just get my screen back. There we are. Okay, if we move on to the next slide, please, James. Besides the director and the deputy director roles and those of the National Office members, the Council has a wide scoping set of members and direct representation from specialist interest groups. So this, the general membership that we have covers all of the dimensions that are listed in that bullet point, and we're championing diversity on the EDI agenda of the organisation as well on all this. So things are set to include even more diversity, hopefully. Also, corresponding members are connected from outside initiatives and organisations. So if we go on to slide 5, James, you can see this is just a snapshot of the web page for PSC on IPEM's website that gives you detail of who's who and a little bit more around those corresponding members. So the web address is just there at the bottom. So if we move on to slide 6, please, James. So we're going on to PSC's activities. PSC supports the communications team, which supported the communications team response to the Department of Health and Social Care's consultation on healthcare regulation, deciding when statutory regulation is appropriate. So the organisation put a organisation's response to this, which was collected through the communications team, basically. Another thing is PSC has been overseeing relaunching of IPEM's Part 2 training scheme in the guise of the IPEM Clinical Scientist Guided Training Scheme. So the timeline for this, the curriculum was approved by PSC in February 2022, and the timeline for it approved in June 2022, both those by PSC. And things are on track at the moment for enrolling the first cohort in May 2023. One of the things we're doing alongside this is shepherding the people who are currently on Part 2 to reach the end of the process. So there's an ongoing initiative to encourage people who are signed up on Part 2 but are sort of going slowly on it, I suppose, to get them through the system quickly now, so that we can be operating on the new structure. So IPEM also investigated how to access the NHS Learning Support Fund for technologists to access healthcare science undergraduate degrees. So currently PSC is drafting a paper to trustees on this issue. And then PSC approved production of STP light touch video competencies. These were really to cover a gap during the pandemic lockdowns, where people training couldn't really access in-person acquaintanceships and placements, and it was to plug that gap. But it needed to be done quickly, and I think it turned out to be really successful, considering the challenges there, really. PSC commissions and gives oversight to Workforce Intelligence's programme of workforce surveys. So in the past cycle, we've included these three. They've included these 3 workforce reports. But of course, these are these are coming through the system all the time, really. So it was keeping a handle on those as they come through and giving them the right oversight. If we can go on to slide 7, please, James. So I mentioned in the first slide that PSC approves task and finish groups to address its issues in its action plan, for which it has oversight. So I should point out that these aren't the only task and finish groups operating in IPEM. So, for example, STERIC, Science, Technology and Engineering Research and Innovation Council, operates similarly around its own remit. So, if you look at this bullet point list, you'll see on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet point, there's a technologist career structure development task and finish group. So I'll point to that, but we'll move on to the next slide, which I've listed some of the higher profile activities which the council's currently engaged in and will be pursuing through the next annual cycle. So there's work going on medical physics expert ongoing recognition to assure that we keep a cohort of MPEs registered and signed up into the system, and then also we're reviewing streamlining opportunities within IPEM's engineering master's level accreditation process. So this is to remove duplications really in the accreditation process for courses and try and simplify what course providers have to do to be able to reach accreditation and not repeating the same type of process through several organisations to get there. Then there was a position paper on championing the value of clinical technologists' healthcare science skill sets. This is really aimed at recruiting managers in health organisations for realising the benefits of employing a balance of clinical and technical professionals in a given service, because they all add extra value through their differences in their skill sets. And then back to the task and finish group reference I mentioned in the last slide, the clinical technology career structured development task and finish group is driving the agenda on that structured development. So they're just an example of some of the things. It's not an exhaustive list, and I'd encourage people who have an interest in these things to put themselves forward for volunteering. Particularly when it's time for the volunteer applications to come in. We're always in these groups, which PSC is one of them. We want to increase that diversity, so we want to hear from everybody who is interested in making a contribution here. And that's all levels through the career structures and ages and all that kind of thing. I won't go on in case I say the wrong thing, but yeah, we're very keen to get people's interest in these things, and all of the application things are looked at closely and scrutinised, with the people's what they're going to bring to the group in mind and everything. So we can just go on to the last slide then, and James, just to thank everyone for listening and their interest, and I'd be happy to take any questions, or failing that, PSC can always field questions at any time on any issue. If you want to contact us, you can do so through the national office and we'll pick that up.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Does anyone have a quick question for Richard?
Hi, sorry, I'm raising my actual hand because I cannot seem to be able to use the digital one. It's Fimenta here. Richard, I think it's 6 o'clock, but there are quite a few items that you mentioned where I think quite a few of us were not aware about. So, for example, I didn't know anything about clinical technologies registration scheme for non-ionizing radiation, which is my field. So that's a bit surprising, but possibly good news. Similarly, I think with the part 2, again, it'd be interesting to understand the new guided scheme, what's that going to offer? Because some of us that advise current part 2 trainees, they could do with some more support than an advisor. So should we contact you offline? Who can we contact to have some more information before it's out?
Well, firstly, I should say I pick up on what Phil was saying right at the beginning, and that is, with the current, the change in the website, it's acknowledged that we're lacking information in that website, and the page I showed you earlier of PSC, that's the only page there is about PSC with the membership on. Previously, we had a lot more information on there, but I'm keen to be able to put this this sort of information out on the website. The stuff that can be publicly accessible, we can make that publicly accessible. If it has to be members only, then there will presumably be a way of being able to make that available to members. And then we've got the Teams channels that are being set up now, where formerly the web spaces were. And yeah, in the meantime, contact us through the national office. And if you have a particular personal interest, a personal professional interest, then want to be involved, we can make sure we join the right connections. I'm a great proponent of understanding networks and reducing the number of nodes one has to go through to get the information to the person that needs it. So I'm keen. PSC also can operate to short circuit those sort of connections. I don't know if Phil wants to sort of say anything about that or not.
Thanks, Richard. I think Jemima might be a better person to answer questions around PSC than me.
Jemima, then, if you want to just add anything to that, Jemima, just briefly.
Yes, certainly. Fiametta, of course, you can always contact the national office using the training at email address, or myself as the member of office staff who's responsible for managing PSC, with any questions relating to the proposed changes. I suppose the thing to reinforce is that IPEM's governance does require that this is agreed at every step of the way, and so nothing is set in stone. This is one of the activities that PSC is undertaking, and so correspondence with the director of PSC or myself as manager would be the best way to ask questions and gain more information.
Thank you very much, Jemima. That leads us nicely, and thank you to Richard as well, sorry. Brilliant, that leads us nicely to the questions. What I'm going to suggest is we've got some pre-delivered questions that people have kindly submitted. We'll answer those. If anyone does have any questions, please can you put them in the chat? And I'm conscious of time, and there's a few items to go after the formal close of the meeting. So what I'm going to suggest is we'll run for about 5 minutes and answer what we can, and then we'll answer everything else in chat. Does that sound sensible to you, Phil?
That's fine with me, Rob. Thanks.
Okay. So Edwin, if people could start typing their questions in the chat system to everyone, please, so that we can see them. And then Edwin, I believe you have some questions that you wish to ask that you've already submitted. Would you like to do that? I thought Edwin was in, but apparently not. Okay, we do have them, so if necessary, we can do that. Okay, I'm just finding them. Might be Edwin's. If Edwin, if you're having technical troubles, could you just stick something in the chat, and that way at least we know. Here we go. Right. Right. So not seen anything. So what I suggest is, so the first question was basically, I find the website very, oh, sorry, are you there?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you. Would you like to ask your questions?
Yes, I was just apologising because I was only just able to join the meeting, so I don't know what's gone before. One question is about equivalence. We have two equivalence systems now. The AHCS have got a very good website that gives equivalence arrangements for both STP and HSST. On the other hand, IPEM is supporting Route 2, but the ACS website is very outdated and it doesn't take account of the new qualification arrangements, the STP, and it looks as though it is really a very poor alternative in the way it's presented. I was just wondering what's going on in the background. To modify the website for the ACS probably involves HCPC, unless some minor changes can be made directly. But I just wonder what the long-term view is. Do the trustees want to have two parallel systems in the future, or do they see these two changing to be just one?
I'm happy to take that on behalf of the trustees. So basically, in terms of the ACS website, I think as IPEM, we can probably just point this out to the ACS because obviously we don't have control over their website. And there are a number of professional bodies that feed into the ACS. But in terms of the need for two equivalent systems, I think that it's important that we have a wide range of access to the profession. We're shortage occupations in many cases, and a variety of routes and assessment policies is desirable from the point of view it provides resilience as well as providing different entries, because the two systems do, I think people will find, produce something slightly different. So that's one reason I think to maintain it. Yes, and there has been a sort of review of this that's been undertaken in depth when the level 7 apprenticeship was put in, which is providing effectively a third route when it finally comes on stream fully. I think basically there is a long-term need for two routes, and I think that if there isn't, it will become apparent from the numbers going through the two routes. But as far as I'm aware, both routes are in use and provide important resource to the profession. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think IPEM is a very major contributor to the ACS system. So I think it should have a strong enough voice to advocate making changes to the website. I mean, the website's terrible at the moment. It's been like it for a long time. And if you log into it, if you just access it, you just get a red screen. You have to sort of scroll to get anywhere. So I think IPEM, although it is not ACS, it is a serious component of ACS and ought to be able to influence what's happening at ACS.
Okay, we can.
The other thing that's important is that it's not covering computing very well, and computing looks to be thoroughly covered in the HCPC, sorry, in the AHCS system, and we don't know what's much going on with the ACS. We don't even get a list of the assessors any longer.
Yeah, certainly
so
there are
we feel
improvements.
that there's a lack of assessing in one of the areas. We can't just look at the list and check and say, oh, we ought to raise that flag.
Right. Okay, I mean, we certainly can raise these issues with the ACS and have a discussion, and but I think, you know, our influence is ultimately limited by the fact it is technically a separate organisation. And systems aren't hosted on our systems as far as I'm aware, so you know there may be technical limitations that they've struggled with, but we can certainly do that for you.
Just there are technical.
Oh, sorry,
Could I-
Fiona, got a comment. Yeah.
I have a comment, Edwin, because I was having a conversation as a part two advisor to suggest that we advise what routes and we decide for when we're advising someone which is the best one for them. So I think actually a start point would be to emphasize more that there are the two routes and that we can help them to choose their best one rather than just the ACS one. And I think that's a bit more in IPM control than changing what the ACS is doing. And then, as Rob was saying, with the years, we will see with the processes whether we need to choose one or another. But the ACS seems to be very resilient to change. So we might we'll have to focus on change what we can change.
Great, thank you, Fiona. So, Edwin, I'm just conscious of time. Would you like to ask one more of your questions, and we can always make sure that the others go in the chat with the response, because I'm just conscious we have to close at past, and then we can summarise.
Well, as you know, one of my questions was about the website, but you've probably covered that to some degree.
Right, okay.
If I do the other one just as a straight question with no background,
yeah.
Do the trustees need to reconsider IPEM's approach to quality systems?
Right, okay, so this is related to MPES, sorry. So what IPEM is currently doing, so we can give you a little bit of information on this, is that IPEM is currently engaging with the UCAS Technical Advisory Committee, and basically what we're doing is looking at what the level of interest is currently in accreditation and working out a strategy on how to move forward in the best way in terms of that field. So there is work going on, but yes, I would agree it's not complete. So Phil, do you want to just summarise? I think you've been happily responding, so you're probably the best person to summarise very briefly what's on the chat.
We had a question from Hugh about the medical and dental guidance notes, and I'm asking a member of staff to drop them a line after the meeting to bring them up to date on that. And Manny asked about financial support for members in 2023 as a cost of living crisis support measure. Manny, now you're on the board of trustees, you'll get the opportunity to debate the budget on October 13th. The budget was sent today to the Finance and Business Planning Committee and will be discussed on Tuesday and at the trustees meeting in mid-October.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Thank you everyone for questions. Thank you for your engagement. Next item is any other business, and I can state that there is no items of any other business being submitted, so we will take that as the case and move on. And finally, before I close, I would just like to say a huge debt of thanks from the organisation and the trustees, both to those trustees who are leaving us, the member and non-member trustees who are going on to do other things and their terms are finished. Thank you to all the volunteers who have contributed thus far. That includes the trustees. You've all been fantastic. It's brilliant. And welcome to all our new trustees and volunteers. We look forward to your contributions. To those who are leaving, please don't forget you can volunteer again and do get involved and stay involved. And finally, particularly to the National Office, because without the volunteers, trustees or the National Office, none of this would happen. So thank you to the National Office who've done a lot of work, and all the new people who've come in to help us. Basically, you've all been fabulous, and that will draw the meeting to a close in terms of the formal agenda. We've got a couple of other items which we're going to get through before 6:30. So I'm going to hand straight over to Catriona, who's going to launch the science strategy, and then there's an opportunity to have some questions and answers with Anna Barnes, the president-elect. Is it worth putting some of the questions in whilst Catriona's speaking? It's slightly disrespectful to Catriona, but if people have questions, I think we can pre-prepare to the chat if things come to people's minds. That sounds a sensible approach, Phil, and then we can answer some of the questions.
And if Kat, I hate to say it, you've worked very hard on this, but if you could keep it succinct, that would be ideal. The meeting has to end at 6:30 because the Zoom will expire.
Thank you. We'll hand straight over to Kat. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Phil. And yeah, in that vein, I'll crack on. And if anyone has any questions that we don't have time for, please feel free to contact me at any time outside the meeting. Next slide, please, James. So I'll start by thanking everyone who took part in this, whether it was the research or the review. There's been a huge amount of work from a huge number of volunteers, and I'm really grateful for the support in doing that. So why do we need a strategy? Really, this is about making sure that IPEM is forward-facing and we're able to prepare our members for the changes that are coming to the workspace, and also that we're shaping it in the direction that we want to. So that's kind of come up in what people have already said this evening. So this is, sorry, comments are popping my screen. So really this is about helping us take a step back, get a holistic view that brings together all of the disparate groups and committees and entities across IPEM, help us work together in a more connected, strategic way, so that we have a more powerful voice and we're able to influence things at a higher level with more impact. Slide, please, James. So I've looked at other people's strategies and putting this together to see kind of how they're structured and make sure that we're interacting with other organizations in a way that there's kind of natural mesh points. And actually the Institute of Physics strategy launched yesterday, and it's in a similar vein, different topics, obviously, but there are 3 grand challenges, which are the big things that are going to be affecting society as a whole, and having a knock-on effect with healthcare sciences, which is climate change and the environment, workforce and the skills that are needed to see change through, and safety and security, which is pretty much everything from cybersecurity through to radiation protection and everything that lies in between. The emerging trends are the technologies and enabling platforms that will help us address these challenges and drive knowledge and professionalism within healthcare sciences, which I'm using to encompass technology, engineering, and science with a capital S. So that's alignment and collaboration. If you think about sort of knowledge transfer partnerships and networks between different sectors, and also within IPEM, having our SIGs working together to explore interdisciplinary and cross-functional spaces, and having people have already spoken about having our committees talking in a more joined up way so that we can make more impact and work as more than the sum of our parts. Digitization, so that includes things like AI, quantum on the horizon, and more pragmatically just digitization of what we already have, and personalized health. So that's looking at omics and just the way that things are delivered, whether it's looking at huge population scale health, or whether it's very individualized with data gathered from wearables and sensors, which of course ties in with digitization. Slide, please, James. So the ambitions are really to streamline our activity, do more with the resources that we already have, so more in terms of being able to interact at a high level with big players, come together with those people to make sure that we have more impact at sort of government and policy decision-making levels. Make sure that we're getting the most out of our network by making those connections at the right time, so that if someone's got a bright idea but they don't have the follow through to be able to make it happen, then we can provide that within our networks, and we'll be able to provide that to the rest of our members through our professional knowledge outputs that we already have, so our reports and our events, but we're doing it not just looking at the problems that are immediate and apparent right now, but that will be coming through in the next 5-10 years. Slide, please, James. So how are we going to drive this through? So the science strategy is going to be delivered through STERIC, who are the kind of reporting council for all of our SIGs. So that's one way of encapsulating information from across the organisation. And having that central oversight means that we can see what's happening across the organisation at one go. We can draw those strings together where it works out, and we've always got a central point of communication. So embedding the strategic thinking and the futures thinking is going to start within STERIC and then percolate throughout the organisation. And I think there should be something really exciting to get involved with. It's something that I've had to learn in doing this strategy, and it's just a really interesting way of looking at things in a new light. And it does change the way that you do things, even though you're doing more or less the same things. So we're going to be looking at support that we can offer, whether that's through funding, whether it's through partnering, making the most of our networks, or whether there's other non-financial support that we can offer, whether it's training or mentorship, making those connections. I will rattle through this. James, next slide, please. Ooh. All right, I've cut the bottom off my slides, but so what do we need from you? Really, the strategy that I've produced is a framework. It needs to be populated with ideas and kind of the knowledge and experience from across our network. So obviously our membership spans a huge number of different disciplines which specialize and subspecialize, and there's no way that I can encapsulate that in a single document. So this really, that granularity of information needs to come from you, the members. So in terms of volunteers, the science leadership strategy is going to be, well, actually it already is embedded in some of our terms of references, and we'd like to see it reflected in the action plans and the annual plans of our SIGs and our other committees. And within the office, well, I'll be making sure that we've got the flow of information and people are able to make those conversations and connections to make sure that they can develop those ideas through to action. And I realize that not everyone has the time or capacity or inclination to engage in those kind of formal long-term roles, but this isn't just something for people who are volunteering. You can engage at any point, whether it's transitory, whether you've just got an idea that you want to ping out, or whether it's longer term. And I would encourage everyone to engage. And if you have any questions that I've not covered, and I realize I'm really flying through, please do contact me or contact Steric, and I'd be very happy to talk to you in detail. Slide, please, James. So what comes next? Steric's first meeting is coming up very soon, and we have a SIG Chairs meeting, and we'll be having a kickoff with kind of getting it implemented in both of there, and from there it will percolate throughout the organisation through all those connections going on and on and on. Evidence gathering, so that's kind of building up that information that I've already talked about, and from within the office I'll be doing horizon scanning and just building up a body of evidence, so that what we're doing is gathering proper curated information, and we can be making data-driven decisions. Ideally this would have been an in-person event, but we're online, so I'll be running a series of mini events between now and Steph that Andrew's already mentioned, to kind of develop some of the ideas and the strategy, and then build it towards the conference where we can have people in person and we can have those discussions and debates, which will be documented, as Andrew's already mentioned as well. And I'll be looking at our policies and procedures and practices to make sure that everything that we're doing in the office is driving forward and facilitating these changes that we want to see and aren't holding us back. Slide, please, James. So what can you expect from us? All of our committees now have a named office contact, so it should be easier than ever for you to get in contact with the right person who can then make sure that you have the information that you need without having to wade through our website or anything else. And that should help us through like staff changes and things like that as well. This needs to be completely seamless. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to get involved. This isn't just for very senior people or for trainees, it's for everybody. I want to recognise the depth and the strength that having everyone involved will bring. And slide, please, James. Determined to finish at 5:25. So next year, 1 year in, we'll be having a review at a Volunteers Day where we can look at whether the science leadership strategy has achieved what it set out to do, and if not, what we can do differently. And in the meantime, yes, I'd welcome any feedback and suggestions. And slide, please, James. Yep, so I forgot to mention the URL at the beginning. This went live very shortly before the meeting, but the QR code does work. You can access the document online, and again, get in touch if you would like to discuss anything. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kat. I'm conscious we've cut you to short time before, so thank you for your patience and for all the hard work of everyone who's contributed to this. Please download it, please read it. I think this is a very significant step for IPEM actually having a formalised science strategy and leadership strategy like this. It's very significant, so thank you. So the next and final item, we have just 4 minutes. I noticed that no one's put any questions in the chat, and as chair, I should probably ask Anna a question. As president, I feel like I shouldn't. So what I'm going to say to Anna is, Anna, is there anything you want to say in the absence of any other questions? And no is an exceptional answer to this, because I know you won't have prepared anything because you've been waiting to be in responsive mode.
Hello everybody. I just wanted to say a few words just to introduce myself and just say that I feel really privileged that that I've put my hand up to take on this role at a time that is so dynamic and exciting for IPEM. I think Rob's really paved the way, and I really want to take up his mantle and push IPEM into the 21st century. We're 2 decades in, and I still think that we could blow the dust off a bit. What I'm looking forward to for my presidency in a year's time is I want to be far more accessible through social media to people, and to wave the flag about you are IPEM and IPEM is us, rather than it being an us and them situation. And I really hope that the leadership strategy launch is the beginning of that. And if anyone has worked with me closely before, I have a really strong need to push forward the boundaries of equity, diversity and inclusion. And quite frankly, my view for IPEM up to 25 will be the fact is that if we're not part of the solution, then we're part of the problem. So I intend to take a very proactive stance on mixing up our diversity and changing it from this sort of rather middle class conservative with a small c STEM profession. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck in with that. So hi, and looking forward to working with you all.
That's excellent, and I think you've answered Kim Saint's question as well, and I'm with you on that last thing, so we'll have a chat and see if we can get that started as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I will just answer Kim's question because it's a very good one. My one aim for my presidency, Kim, is for me not to be the first and only female president. I aim to be, I don't know what the question is, but I'm certainly not going to be a Maggie Thatcher. I will definitely pull you up behind me, very assuredly. So it'll be about sustainability and how do we keep diversity amongst the fellows and the presidents going forward over the next 20 years. Thanks, Kim.
Great stuff. Excellent. So anyone who's thinking about it, get your fellowships and get your nominations in. Let's get people in. Brilliant. Okay, I'm conscious we have less than 1 minute. So thank you all very much for attending. Thank you to everyone who's contributed. Thank you to the National Office for making it work. And thank you for your questions, comments and everything else. And please get in touch, volunteer, join in, and great stuff. Thank you all very much indeed. We'll close the meeting now. Thank you. Bye.